Thanks for listening to the Drummers Weekly Groovecast. You can contact the show at twitter.com/DW Groovecast and through Facebook at facebook.com/Drummers Weekly Groovecast.
Good evening.
I am warning you right now, if you touch my drums, I will stab you in the neck with a knife.
Ain't a bookie. Ain't a bookie. Mom!
Take it easy. Lower it.
I'm not gonna lower it. I have to do this now.
I don't mind you playing it, but lower it.
Well, we get straightened out?
Oh, we had a problem. I mean, we tried to do everything we could.
What do you mean?
Well, you know what I mean.
Next.
Little trouble there. You're rushing.
Yeah, well, you know, that's just like your opinion, man.
Yeah.
John, it's my favorite time of year.
What's that?
We've got baseball, football, and hockey all at the same time.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Oh, it's good, isn't it?
I'll be honest with you. It's my favorite time of year because we're finally to the point where people are not looking at me like, why don't you have shorts on?
I always look at you like that.
I know. I'm kind of vain like that.
Show off those gams, baby.
Nope. The world does not need that trauma.
Should I go ahead and tell everybody that we're just morphing this podcast into a sports talk thing now?
Well, you are. Mine's going to be a self-help, psychological evaluation thing. We were talking about my legs and my insecurity, and now you want to talk about sports?
You don't think I could morph that into a sports talk thing with your legs on top of it?
Thank God my favorite hockey player doesn't have legs like that. You know, yeah, I could see you doing it.
I thought Brett Hull had great legs.
I never really paid attention to that. I know he had great friends that bought him lots of shots whenever I'd hang out with him.
Oh, man, he was fantastic on the sports commentary on the World Cup.
Yeah.
Oh, in fact, he was the best part of the entire thing, man.
If filterless was ever, to be applied to someone, it might be Brett.
Is this a good time to bring up that Zach Boychuk is one of our fans, one of our followers?
I think I'd like to say hi to him.
Oh, man. Big
Zach,
shout.
Do you play drums?
Yeah, man, get back to us. Let us know what's going on. We'd love to have you on.
Come on.
Yeah.
We'll talk a little bit of drums, and then we'll get to things that matter like hockey.
Yeah, man, I want to know what kind of curve he uses on his stick.
How much tape, man?
Yeah, exactly. Well, anyway, folks, we'll probably end up talking some sports along the way. We just love it too much. It's too good.
That's true. I just can't wait for the Cubs to lose in the ninth inning of Game 7 in the World Series. Oh, sorry.
They're not going to make it that far, man.
Did I say that out loud?
Dude,
dang it.
San Francisco does not lose in the postseason.
It'll be interesting. I definitely wouldn't want to face Mad Bum at any time.
San Francisco, man, they are beasts in the postseason. Nobody wanted to see them get in through that wild card game.
Phil.
No.
You're talking to a Cardinals fan.
You rapscallion.
You know damn well. I know damn well. The Giants are monsters in the postseason. So shut it.
I'm going to go ahead and say right now that I've got the Giants against the Red Sox.
Interesting.
Yeah, in the World Series this year.
I selfishly want Cleveland and the Cubs and Cleveland to win their first World Series in half the time they've waited that Chicago has.
Yeah.
We just lost our entire Chicago listenership.
Perfect segue to say that our listenership in Chicago is burgeoning, man. Awesome. I'm one of these numbers geek guys that I check and see where people are listening, and there are three noticeable increases in our listenership. One is in the Chicago area. Two is in Southern California. But I was I was on the road out there, man. I've been spreading the good word out in
love it.
LA. So we're getting a lot of listenership there. But the most curious place that our listenership has blossomed, and I'm going to say there's nothing nefarious going on there, but Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam is loving the Drummers Weekly Groovecast.
Well, there's probably like a bunch of like, what's that? Mark Giuliana clones now. It was Weckel clones forever in Asia, but now maybe it's like, you know, they're all wanting to hear my wisdom of chops and linear drumming and all the insight I have of that. That's what I'm guessing.
That's so much sexier of an explanation than me saying expats.
No, not expats. No, maybe they want my take on, you know, like dim sum or something. I don't know. That's not even Chinese. That's Chinese.
I thought dim sum was Korean.
Pho.
For pho is Vietnamese.
They
yes.
probably want
Yeah.
my recipe for pho because I'm such an expert.
You ready for a callback, man? I got it. Here's your broadcasting callback of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I had some fantastic dim sum in San Francisco. How do you like that?
That's the place to get it.
I'm telling you. Man.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of it, but
Yeah.
that's if you're gonna dive in, that's a good place to start.
San Francisco's the place, huh?
You could probably say that about just about any food, but
Yeah, it's
a good town.
as
for
you told me,
lots
it's
of stuff. Food.
hard to find bad food in San Francisco.
Yeah, that's the first place I ever had in the Mission District. When I lived out there, we occasionally would go in the city and have fun like dumb young guys do. And there was the first place I ever went to that was like a Chipotle or Moe's, where like, and they in the sign it said burritos the size of your head, and I thought, oh, that's funny. And sure enough, man, we got burritos at 1:30 in the morning, and they were the size of our head, and I think I had 3 meals. So that was kind of my first exposure to a burrito that I knew exactly what was in it, because I'm emotionally like 4 years old when it comes to food. I'll admit.
Just like, give me beef and cheese.
Well, just don't give me onions. I have this thing about onions. So I've watched them put it in, and I knew I was safe.
It's my favorite aromatic, John, is an onion.
See, man, that's just sad. That stuff is nasty.
Well, you live, you learn, right?
Onions are like prog rock drummers with no feel.
How did you tie an onion into prog rock drumming?
Because they both make me really uncomfortable.
All right.
Oh yeah. Well, hey, if it helps, I've had an interesting week. So
Yeah.
take everything I say with a grain of salt.
All right. Well, folks, now that we've bored you to tears and you've turned the show off, let me go ahead and say that we appreciate you listening. As always, please stay in touch with us. You can email us at our Gmail account, our traditional email account, drummersweeklygroovecast@gmail.com. You can always contact us at Facebook, facebook.com/drummersweeklygroovecast. And then you can tweet us, which this is how we got in touch with Zach Boychuk at twitter.com/DW Groovecast. Now, with those bits of technical and social media information out there, let me go ahead and say this: we're going to have some surprises. We're gonna have some new nifty things coming up here over the next few weeks that we will make you guys aware of. We're going to make our social presence even a little bit more available to you guys. It's still in the infancy stage at the moment, but baby steps. We're about a quarter of the way into 1 year worth of podcasts, so we're being very measured about what we're going to do, but we'll have some nifty things coming up for you guys fairly soon. And also, don't forget to go by our fledgling YouTube channel, and it's still so fledgling at the moment that we don't even have a URL for it yet. We've got to have, I think it's about 100 subscribers before we can actually make it the youtube.com Drummers Weekly Groovecast channel. But, you know, humble start, humble beginning.
Probably because I haven't posted my drum chart video like I promised.
You said it, not
People
me.
are pissed, including the guy who gives this podcast his all. I can't look it in the eye right now.
Well, that's all right. You have other redeeming qualities like your legs.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So,
When
well,
they're shaved, they have that shiny kind of thing like models have.
oh, that's nice, man.
It's like
I never
soccer
noticed that
moms
part.
get, you know.
Yeah. You know, you noticed the
Actually,
soccer
it's
mom
not
thing,
shiny.
huh?
It's just they're opaque and the sun's bouncing off of them in like a mirror.
Well, at least they're not translucent, right?
Well, they're close.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So, folks, today's show, we're going to call it's the proverbial trick bag.
Trick bag.
Trick bag. You like that? I used to get those when I was a kid. You know, you'd put like a quarter in the machine and the little trick bag would come out and they would
Tricks,
be, yeah, there'd be like a super ball in there and like a, you know, maybe like a little toy car or something like that. That's what today's show is. It's a drummer's trick bag.
You have fond memories, man.
You know.
I think of tricks. I just think about like how many I've turned.
Oh.
Wait. Crap. Sorry, Mom.
We used to be a PG-rated show.
Yeah.
Well, that turned on a dime.
Well, I mean, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be of the sexual nature. It could be like, you know, I play drums at a wedding or something. So, you know, a hoe is a hoe is a hoe.
No comment. So, but John and I, when we were talking about what we were going to do this week, we kind of wrapped a whole bunch of different things into one package to where we talked about, well, we've got some listener mail that we need to get to and some listener comments we need to get to. And we kind of said, well, you know, there's enough questions and enough things that, like little tips and little pieces of brilliance, shall we say, that we could kind of put it together and make a show out of it. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to take some different shorter questions and some like shorter little topics and wrap it all together into a big drumming burrito and give it to you guys.
Yeah. It's kind of based on like, in a way, like things that are annoying or,
Yeah.
you know, solutions to some everyday stuff that just, you know, can be a hindrance or can, you know, you just kind of like, man, this and that, you know, this isn't quite working for me. What can I do? So it's sort of that kind of vibe that this came out of. So hopefully we'll be able to, you know, if you're struggling with something like that, we might have an answer, and, you know, you may know, but feel validated, which is always good too.
Yeah, it's kind of easy solutions to common problems.
Yep. Amen.
You know?
That's what it is.
So anyway, we'll go ahead and get started with this. John, do you want to go first? Or do you want me to go first?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll go ahead and go first. And the first one that I will go ahead and bring up is it's kind of one of those things that I have a lot of students that end up bringing this one to me in one fashion or another. And the majority of the time it comes up whenever they come to me for a lesson from like at my studio and they play on my set, and it has to do with bass drum pedal setup. And what they'll come to me with is, wow, it seems significantly easier to play on your pedal than on mine. And I say, well, what do you think the issue is? And most of the time they go, I don't know. I have no idea what the issue is.
Just doesn't feel right. You don't connect with it.
Right.
Yeah. We've all been there.
Yeah. And so what I will tell them, I'll say, look, if you can't pinpoint what it is on your next lesson, why don't you just bring your pedal to me and let's figure it out. We'll just compare it. We'll put it side by side. And let me go ahead and say this. It doesn't, I won't say it doesn't always. I will say that 95% of the time it does not have to do with the pedal brand or even the line of the pedal. You know, in other words, you can many times make a student model pedal feels significantly better with the adjustments that I'm going to talk about. But let me tell you what normally comes to me, in other words, what they normally bring to me and how I normally fix it or how I set it up, okay? Because any of you folks out there that are listening to this that are having some bass drum pedal issues, I'm going to do the best that I can to paint this picture here on this. So normally what happens, they'll bring a pedal into me, and the first thing that I will notice is that the length of the beater, in other words, the actual beater ball shaft, is normally really too short. In other words, they won't have the beater ball itself elongated far enough out of the frame of the pedal to where it creates a decent, what I'll call throw, or it doesn't give you enough leverage. And then to compensate for that, the majority of the time, the student will have the spring significantly too tight. And then part 3 of that, what that normally happens then is that the actual length of the stroke, or the distance that the beater ball at rest is setting from the bass drum head, is too close. In other words, I will describe that to a student as far as like, look, your beater ball distance at rest, when you don't even have your foot on the pedal, it's too close to the bass drum head. And it would be like if I told you, hey, we're going to play backbeats on the snare drum, but you can never get your stick any more than 3 inches away. In other words, you've got a very limited stroke at that standpoint, right? So what I always do is the very first thing, I will take the actual length of the beater ball and elongate it out to where, like, for example, let's say you're playing on a 22-inch bass drum, okay? I get it to where it's fairly close to the center. Doesn't have to be dead on to the center of the bass drum, but I'll get it to where it's fairly close to the center. Now, if you're a jazz drummer and you're playing on an 18-inch bass drum, the beater ball is above center on that. So, again, this is generalities we're talking about, but, it is what it is when we're talking, when we don't have video to back this up. And then the second part of what I will do then is I will loosen the spring tensioning up fairly significantly to where it's at least in the middle of the spring tensioning. In other words, on the screw that you sometimes below, a lot of times below that. In other words, below the middle part of the tensioning. And then part 3 is then I will adjust the actual length of the beater stroke to where when the pedal is at rest, in other words, and when your foot's off the pedal, the beater ball itself, it won't be laying parallel. In other words, if you're looking at the side, if you're looking from the side of the pedal, it's not laying parallel to the floor, but it will be slightly above parallel to where, I guess if you're talking in terms of angle, it might be I guess maybe at a 40-degree angle, something like that, 40 to 45 degree. So it gives you a significantly larger stroke. It allows you to play fuller, louder strokes if you need that. And then, again, if you need, say, feathering on the bass drum, the pedal tension is significantly looser to where you can just use the weight of your foot on the pedal to allow that beater ball to be close to the bass drum head. So there you go. That's what I do for that.
Well, that's awesome, man. I'm sure it makes a huge difference for students too. I know that pedals are interesting in that a lot of times, and a million people I know like fall out of favor with something, and it felt good, I could play it effortlessly, and it just kind of and I think a lot of times it has to do with adjustment. And, especially on older or lower price pedals, you have where that strange nut that kind of keeps the tension of the spring, that can come undone really easy. A lot of the better pedals now lock.
Right.
And that, but, all these things factor into how that pedal responds. And I think also the cam is another part of it. You and I might prefer different cams. You might like that perfectly round cam and how it feels, or if you have more strength in your leg than I do. I don't have a heavy foot. I tend to like that accelerated one where there's a push at the end that gives it a little more oomph because I'm not a heavy foot guy, So there's a lot of things that you can get into that are very specific and also very much based on adjustment, and that's something I think you should pay quite a bit of attention to. You know, like there's nothing worse than fighting a pedal. Like I've had nights where I'm playing something and I can't get like that 16th, you know, quarter note E, you know, of 2
to 3
thing, and it's just not flowing. And you know, sometimes that's just an adjustment thing. Sometimes it's just your body's telling you, I'd rather be home watching hockey.
Yeah, I found that the majority of the time, also, just like you said, that you can, if you're patient enough with it and you know what you're looking for, and maybe that's even a better way to kind of frame this, is most people don't know what they're looking for.
Yeah, that's
they
true.
You know, they just, in other words, it's kind of one of those things that the pedal came out of the box, and then you start messing around with it, and it gets to a certain level, and you know, you just kind of throw your hands in the air. You don't really know what to do. But you know, again, when you have 30 years of experience of messing around with these and playing with pedals that are good pedals and that feel right and whatnot, you can then kind of, you know what you need to adjust to be able to get to it, you know. And so I think that's probably the thing is, you know, if you know what feels good, you can then make the adjustments fairly quickly. And unless you've got a broken pedal or just a pedal that won't adjust to it, you can pretty much get where you need to be.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think it's always funny too, like in drum shops, you'll see 15 pedals lined up on that, you know, little pedal mount with the rubber pad and all that, and you're kicking them. It's like, I'm not sure if that's ultimately the best way to figure out what pedal you want, because depending on how it was set up or how it wasn't set up could factor into your opinion of it in that immediate, you know, couple strokes, you know. So it's sort of a, you know, make sure you take some time, and you know, maybe if you're buying it, especially if you're buying an expensive pedal, be sure to do 2 things. You know, one is be very careful in the testing of it to keep it nice on it, because have a return policy at the store, because you may want to take it back and try a different one. And you know, that's something that you should do if you're spending $150, $200, $300 on a pedal.
Absolutely.
You know, make sure. So there's some things to be mindful of. Kind of along the same lines, adjustment and all that. I've actually had someone ask me. I like to use these certain cymbal stands that they're from the 2000s, or that Pearl Unilock model with the black label, and I like them because they're very simple. The sections where they come together and tighten, you know, they're well designed that they're not going to fail. It's not a bolt going into the tube, you know, that kind of thing. Right. So there's some advantages there that make it hold up better. But more importantly than any of that, you know, they were one of the early gearless tilter. And I first came into gearless tilters with cymbals. Yeah. And I realized, and I know a lot of guys have, that, man, the angle, you know, it's such a personal preference in where you want that angle, and sometimes the most minute adjustment depending on how you hit your cymbals, how you like them, how, even more importantly, how you like them to react after you hit them. These things come into play, and a gearless tilter really helped me to find that magic spot, and so I really am a proponent of those. And again, in the angle, it's unbelievable how in the tooth, the gears, the ones with gears, the teeth, from flat to the next angle, you know, your wheelhouse could be right in the middle, and you have no way of making that happen. So it limits you in that sense. And we're getting into pretty, you know, specific personal thing here, but
millimeters.
Why wouldn't you, given a choice, use the option that allows you exactly what you want? And here's what's interesting about the cymbal tilter thing. You know, ride cymbals, man, it's like, a little different. I actually use a boom and that come in, so some of it's the arm
Right.
extension bar. But just that angle alone and how that cymbal responds is huge. You know, I don't deal well with a really flat ride, and I see some guys really like that. For some reason, it doesn't respond as well to me. It may be that I don't use as heavy of a ride. Something's factoring like that.
Right.
But man, where the gearless really came into play was a snare drum. And we're talking every geared snare drum.
Yeah.
It's perfectly flat, or the next one is angled too far and it doesn't feel good. And that's where I got super locked into, like, I gotta have gearless snare drum.
Man, I completely agree on all facets, because where I got originally spoiled on the gearless stuff was the first professional kit that I ever owned back in the, I guess it was in the mid 80s, was a Yamaha recording custom set. And, you know, in particular, the snare stand and all the tom mounts were uniballs.
Yep. Love it.
And I mean, there's so many great things about that. And you know, one quick thing I was thinking about when we were originally talking about this, and we were talking about gearless hardware and uniballs and stuff, is that if you want to take it to the nth degree, especially with like tom mounts and whatnot, something that's kind of cool, man, about the uniball mounts is that if you wanted to do this, you can actually flip those drums upside down, leave them on the actual mount, and change heads and or tune. You know,
I love that.
Isn't that
Yamaha
crazy?
mount.
Yeah,
man. And even better, I love Gretsch USA Custom, and a Yamaha mount fits perfectly into TechWare mounts holes. So
I've
you can
got
change
some
them
of
out.
those, John.
I know you do.
Yeah,
because you're smart and you know me.
That's right.
No,
Yeah.
that's really, they do.
Yeah.
You don't have to re-drill on a Gretsch. Little
Right.
inside info. Some guys know. The Yamaha tom bracket that goes on a bass drum is the identical footprint to Gretsch TechWare.
How do they know?
Well,
How did they know?
I think Fred Gretsch is such a visionary that he said, that cranky bastard John Chalden
Yeah.
has his little preferences, and he's going to bitch all over the internet when it comes.
Now that
Because
is
he noticed this way
yeah.
back then. But,
Yeah.
you know, he's going to make a big stink about it. So I'm just going to, TechWare is going to have the same.
And you know, they used to say that all he
And then I
cared
woke
about-
up and realized that was all a bunch of crap.
Yeah, they used to say that all he used to care about were the guitars.
Me? Him?
No, him.
Oh, him,
Yeah.
I
Not
think
the
he
case,
still
huh?
does. And
Yeah.
weirdly enough, like imported guitars, because he probably made the most money.
Yeah. You know, John, when we have time on one of the shows, I want to bore the listeners to death with my story about my forced entrance into the Gretsch drum factory in Ridgeland, South Carolina, about 15 years ago, where
I
I
like
forced
it.
my way in. Oh, it's a good story, man. Yeah.
I actually have a connection to the manager there, and maybe we could get him on.
Paul? Is
Yeah.
it? Yeah, yeah.
Maybe we could get him on and then, you know, corner him about how unaccommodating he was.
No, actually, he let myself and the great bassist here in town, a guy named Neil Starkey, that I'm
Yeah.
sure that a lot of people are aware. Legend, man, legendary guy. He let me and Neil actually tour the factory, and this was like pre-Command days. You
That's
know?
awesome.
Yeah, so we can get into that at a later time, but it's my turn now.
I think you should do it on your own, because I'm just going to sit here and turn green with envy and spew this hate towards you. So another time when I'm unavailable and you can do your Gretsch story.
The only thing that I'm going to say about it is that it was during a low period of the Gretsch factory when they were having problems with their nitrocellulose lacquer spray and the EPA. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, that was some challenges.
There was some challenges there.
It's an
So,
understatement.
I believe this was probably right around 98, 99 or so when I was down there. But
Were you going to the Jazz Corner?
I was playing
How
at
about
the Jazz
that?
Corner, John.
Man, I'm so in the know.
Yeah.
It's not really that impressive.
Yeah.
Where else is Neil Starkey and Phil Smith going to go in
You didn't think we had
South Carolina?
You didn't think we had a vacation home in Hilton Head?
I mean, I guess you could, you know,
Yeah.
profitable as jazz is.
You can make hundreds of dollars a month playing jazz, John.
Or lose it.
Yeah. It's my turn now. I'm going to go with my next little gem.
All right.
And let me say this. This next little gem actually came from my touring days as a jazz drummer. I'm going to go with a little trick that I kind of dumbed upon. I mean, just literally dumbed upon. And I think this is going to put the light bulb off on many a drummer's head that has to carry their cymbals from time to time. And what it is back when I first started doing some touring where I had to do some fly out dates where drums were provided, but yet I wanted to carry my cymbals, which were all of the fly out jazz dates that I did. I had a flight case made for me, and it was just a traditional cymbal flight case with, the recessed handles and recessed latches and ball corners, the whole thing, and it weighs about 1 million pounds, right? It's got the industrial foam on the inside.
Close, at least.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the manufacturer of this case put the traditional cymbal spindle, right, in the middle of the case, where you just take the cymbals as they are and you put them into the case on top of or through the spindle. The spindle goes through the cymbal hole, and then you just use a nice big piece of huge felt with a nut on top that keeps them secured. Well, that's well and good, and that's the traditional way of doing things. But as you all know,
certainly not out of line by way of
what
what was considered norm.
Right. Well, in a moment of clarity, John, I removed. There was just a large bolt, right, which was the spindle,
right,
and it was just traditionally bolted down underneath the foam, which you could remove, right. So what I did was I removed that center spindle, and then what I did was I went and got a very short bolt with a very with a large enough nut that would cover the threads, right? In other words, where the bolt wouldn't stick up into and create a spike, so to speak. Right. The bolt was big enough to where it would cover all the threads. So what I did was I just took that small bolt, put it up through where the spindle was, put the nut on top of it, then put the foam over top of it. So now you've got this kind of a blank case. Right. And so what I did then was I took my regular cymbal bag, put my cymbals in there, and then put the cymbal bag inside of the case, which would fit. So you're asking yourself, well, why did that psychopath do that? Was it just he needed more protection? Well, it does add a little extra layer of protection. But more importantly, now when I get to whatever city I'm in, I don't have to schlep a 65-pound flight case with me. I just leave my flight case in the hotel room, pull the cymbal bag out, and now I'm mobile with a cymbal bag with my cymbals in it. Voila, thank you.
Awesome stuff. The only drawback to that is when you arrive at the venue, if you just have a cymbal bag, the crew may, view you as less important. Whereas if you bring in that case, they're like, oh, we got a big leaguer. So you kind of you're secure in your status if you're doing that. I'm impressed.
Well, yeah,
whatever. That wasn't even funny. Let's move on.
Flight cases do give you a modicum of street cred.
I said move on. You're not following. Listen, I have enough people in my life right now not following directions. I don't need you to be adding to the. Okay.
Yes, Father.
There you go. You can finish if you want. I just wanted to see if it worked with someone.
No. Well, I was going to say the only time that I ran in where I lost my street cred I'm going to leave the city and even the country out of this.
Yeah.
I would just say it was a third world country, but I literally had a machine gun held on me when I opened up I was going through customs somewhere, and they, I suppose, had either never seen a flight case or rarely had seen a flight case coming through customs there. And when I opened it up and there was a case inside of a case, let's just say they were none too pleased. So,
see, I would think like if you have, it could be like a New York guy going into Chicago, and forget it. Anyway, I'm done. Let's just. I'm tired of trying to be witty today. Hey, just owning my shortcomings. Hey,
when you have a flop, man, you sit there and marinate in it, man. That's when it's good.
Nah, this is just misplaced crap.
Misplaced anger.
No, not anger. Right. Just whatever. Hey, so some of these things we've talked about really come into the realm of ergonomics. When you talk about angles and you're talking about adjustments of springs, all that kind of stuff. And we've talked about thrones in the past. Seats. Sorry, Peter. Mm-hmm. I know thrones is presumptuous.
He didn't like that, huh?
No, he didn't like that, but he'll forgive me.
Don't cater.
He knows I'm a.
Don't cater to these people, man.
All right, sorry.
Yeah.
So thrones. So we've talked about the importance of a good throne and the adjustability of it. We've even discussed in the past how convenient the hydraulic is.
Love it.
By way of things. And I even speaking of that, I've even noticed if I'm playing a gig where there's maybe some jazz stuff early and groove stuff later, I tend to bring my seat up for the jazz stuff. I'm kind of a little more over because I switch out cymbals a little bit and playing them, but still sharing stands. And so that's been really comfortable. Like groove, I come down a little more. So hydraulic thrones are awesome, man. Another infinitely adjustable.
Exactly. And if I want
gearless.
If I want to add one small thing to it, that never fear if you've got one of the old screw top height ones, they are infinitely adjustable if in particular you have just a round top. Mm-hmm. Now if you've got the bicycle top or something like that, man, you have to circumvent that by a couple things. You have to not have the seat top attached to the spindle itself. Right.
Two adjustments ultimately.
You'd have two adjustments at that time. So I think I mentioned on one of our first podcasts, John, that I still have a couple of the old Tama Titan thrones, and those are the ones from the early 80s that have that screw top spindle height adjustment with a traditional round seat, and those are ultimately infinitely adjustable also. Absolutely. From that standpoint. So I wholeheartedly concur on those realms.
Well, with all of that in mind, something that I'm going to encourage everybody to kind of take some time to reevaluate and think about, and I know Phil is on board with this too, but your setup. How adamant are you about consistency? Some people are super anal about it. They're constantly adjusting. Some people are like, there it is, let's play. I think you should be more mindful of it for two reasons. One is, if a lot of things we do are based on muscle memory and that really help us to elevate our playing, muscle memory of technique, muscle memory of, where a ride cymbal sits if you're playing patterns and you're, developing a jazz pattern, you don't put it high up like Al Foster one day and then down low like, Max Roach the next. Right. You find your spot and you get there, and so those all factor into that muscle memory thing, and I think ultimately help your playing. But you got to get really down to the nitty-gritty of it and say, what works for my body? What works for the height I'm sitting at that I prefer? What works for the style of music I'm playing? All of these things, and really sit down and think about your setup. Are my shoulders not what they used to be? Okay, should I bring my cymbals down a little bit? Am I working too hard? Am I reaching too far? All of these things. And what I'm getting at is I'm not going to tell you how to do that because it's going to be different for everyone. But really be mindful of taking the time one day to start with your throwing and start setting up, like kicking your throwing, and then start thinking about the angle of your toms, the placement of your toms, the angle and placement of your cymbals, the heights, where your hi-hat is. If you know, I'm of the mindset that if a hi-hat in the traditional sense is set up, you know, if you're at 9 o'clock, if you will, you know, like if you're sitting at the clock, you're sitting at 6, and you know that doesn't make sense to me because your arms aren't naturally doing that. Mine's more about that 10
or 11 o'clock
10 or 11,
position,
you know.
yeah.
And then if you think about doing two-handed things, it makes more sense too because you're not turning your body and your torso and all that. We've talked a little bit about that, but one thing to help you along with that a lot of people I see don't do is maybe for a while or maybe forever spike your mat, your carpet.
That's good, man.
Have it where you're, you know, you got markings for where your bass drum spurs sit, and maybe where the back of the pedal sits, and then you have where your throne sits, and you can start getting into a very consistent thing, which is inevitably going to help your playing, your mindset, your focus. You know, you could be thinking about music as opposed to, oh, that ride's a little off tonight, or that crash cymbal's a little higher. Get real serious about that stuff, man, and it just, you benefit from it. So spiking your carpet, which we talked about earlier, these carpets, you know, there's something you can do to further enhance things that are specific to you and work for you.
On top of that, it should decrease your setup and adjustment time.
I would, yeah, absolutely.
You know,
you're
whenever
not
you do
guessing
that.
and moving. That's
Yeah.
true. What kind of carpet do you use?
Is this you're trying to get me to incriminate myself?
No. It doesn't have to. I didn't ask you where you got it.
Oh, okay.
Come on, man.
Maybe
Wait.
it's my guilty conscience that's
Let me get
did that, right?
the university. No,
Oh.
forget.
Hey, easy.
You know, you would be, man. You know that show, First 48.
I know.
You would suck at that. You need to be the policeman. Don't ever be the perp, man, because you're just gonna bury yourself, man. Hey, what do you mean? What do you mean where'd I get it?
Do you want me to answer the question or not?
Okay. Did you steal it? No, I didn't ask that. Sorry. Go ahead.
I like the proverbial low pile carpet with a rubber backing.
Oh,
John.
yeah. The industrial doormat.
Oh, absolutely.
The best.
Yeah. But, you know, this entire little segment about setup and ergonomics, I mean, it was originally, we've kind of answered this question in several different ways about three or four different times we've answered it, but we've used like different, I guess you might say, different ways or different topics to get it. Like that podcast that I did, the solo show about the grip and changing grip according, it kind of ties into this entire thing because it was a question that was posed to us months ago. You know, that I had a listener ask something about grip and how it related to playing different styles and this kind of stuff, and this ties directly into it as well, man, that you're set up regarding the instrument height, the instrument angle. It all has to do with the ergonomics of how you get that stuff set up and your playability aspect of it. And you were going down the road a few minutes ago of something that I have students do all the time, and that is when they're having issues with playability, whether again it be an instrument height or an instrument angle, a cymbal, a tom-tom, a snare drum, an accessory. What I always tell them to do is what you were saying. Start first with your throne and your bass drum. Get that to where it's comfortable. Then start adding instruments around it. And I mean, this is not a new concept. I think people have seen this stuff before. Then add your snare drum, then add your hi-hat, then add your ride cymbal. And then I would just tell everybody to add the instruments that you play the most in, next in that succession, and put the wood block on last or whatever, the thing that you play the least.
Ice bell.
I used an ice bell one time, John.
I believe you.
It has a nice ding to it.
I have that on my cell phone. I'm not going to carry another cymbal. Ding! I got a text message.
Yeah,
that's what happened if I heard you playing. Like, if you use an ice bell in this day and age, like 92 people look at their phone. I thought I heard a text message.
Point well taken. Plus, where those things don't fit in a cymbal bag. Where do you carry them?
More
man?
importantly than any of that, man, as a friend, I feel obligated to say, stop, don't use that. So I'm just looking out for you, man.
As another one of my friends would say, it's a perfectly good waste of a cymbal stand.
I got nothing. He is right.
He's right on with that, huh?
Ding.
Yeah. So, but yeah, just start with your bass drum and your throne, and then start adding instruments around. And one of the things also that John was mentioning about the hi-hat stand placement, that is an interesting but common phenomenon that I see a lot of drummers, that they will place their bass drum and have it in a comfortable playing position, and then for some reason they'll take that hi-hat stand and put it right up and under their leg, to where their knee is way above or forward from where the pedal is, and their ankle and foot is way up and under them.
Yeah,
that's such
weird.
a weird concept to me, that it's not one of those things that's more obvious.
I can't for the life of me figure out how that, because even coming up, even with cheap stuff, your hi-hat stands always, you can place it where you want it. So how did that end up happening, and how it, more than one person we've seen, like I know in regards to height of drum throne.
Yeah.
My first drum throne, I couldn't adjust it much, and it was pretty low.
Yeah.
So I became almost like Vinnie Colaiuta circa 1979 low, but it was because I was so used to that, because I couldn't adjust it a lot, and I sat low for a long time, and needless to say, it didn't help a lot of things like my lower back, but the hi-hat thing's a little different. It's kind of like, man,
Totally
you can put
different.
that anywhere.
Put it anywhere,
How
yeah.
does that feel comfortable? It's
Yeah.
bizarre.
John, should we go on a rampage and just be totally retro now and bring back canister thrones? Say that's all we're going to use is canister thrones?
No, because two things. One, they're already heavier than a regular throne.
Good point.
You're going to probably put some stuff in it, so it's going to be even heavier.
There's no good way to transport it either, right?
No, I mean, you got to buy another case if you want to protect it. And like I was saying earlier, sometimes, I'll, depending on what I'm playing style-wise, I might sit higher one set and lower the next. So there's a weird...
Okay, so listeners, cancel the canister throne, reinvention.
No, don't worry about reinventing. Go find them and sell them for hundreds of dollars. I encourage that, because if you find original ones, they'll bring you some coin, but I wouldn't suggest using them in there.
So you heard it here first. Here are the instructions. We are not going to condone the use of canister thrones, but we totally condone the resale of them.
Amen.
Done.
If you take my advice and find one and sell it, you can buy 2 thrones you love.
Sage words from John.
There you go.
All right, so to finish up on the ergonomic thing, one thing that in this, John will actually lump this into the ice bell category of the waste of a cymbal stand, but I'm going to say that I every blue moon have to use these, And I'm going to tell you how I make it work. I think a lot of people have issues with mounting inverted China cymbals. And it's a couple things. They have problems mounting them simply from a lot of China cymbals when they're inverted, they have the square bell, right? And it already creates angle problems with that. And on top of that, because of the intrinsic nature of the square bell, it creates a weird, once you play them, it creates a weird response, right? In other words, they don't flow as naturally as just a traditional cymbal that's mounted traditionally. So it creates a weird response. Part 3 of that is that if you are flat out rocking on one of those things, there is a pretty good chance that you can create some damage to it because of that weird square bell that you
it's
have.
not a good.
It's awful. It's an awful thing. So I'm going to be the guy that tells you that the solution to this is to use an Aquarian heavy-duty cymbal spring. They are magic with China cymbals. And one thing that I do on top of that is I will actually use an extra felt between the actual nut that screws down on there to keep the China cymbal even a little bit more stable. Mm-hmm. So that, to me, that is, for my playing, the only way to play an inverted China is to use the heavy-duty Aquarian cymbal spring. It makes all the difference in the world, and it does not restrict the movement of the cymbal. I'm done.
Can we talk about hockey now? Sorry. Hey, I'm going to be careful. If Phil went out of my garage right now, he might find a China. There, I said it.
Let it marinate.
No, granted, I used it last in 1987, but it's all good.
Queensryche?
No. No, man. The outfield.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's good. You were being loyal to that song. You know. Better yet, I want to know who sang that song, man. That's a freaking
what
high
was her
tune.
name?
Oh, seriously. Seriously, no joke.
Wow. We did. I was in a band that when that came out that covered that, and you could feel the dread 3 songs prior to the guy who was going to sing it.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I think I'd rather sing a Journey tune at that point. You know, it's like, what?
Yeah.
That was nutty. Anyway, yeah, I've had my moments. Which I went through a phase where I refused to play a ride cymbal.
Do tell.
And in place I had a China, and I just kind of bang on that on occasion. Not like a ride cymbal, but just for white noise effects. But it was in a band that didn't. We were doing this
that didn't make money.
So we made money.
Oh, you made money?
All right. We didn't do any music. It was all like a lot of drum machine oriented music and funk, where, you know, like even in funk, you know, most of the ride stuff is going to be a bell.
I got you.
All that. So it wasn't something that, I don't know. It was just a weird phase I went through where a couple of years I just said I'm not going to play a ride cymbal, and then in turn, when I went back to it, I loved it.
Did it have any? Was it kind of an answer to like Charlie Watts? I'm going to have my main crash as a China, so therefore I'm just going to make my main ride as a China.
No, I think it was nothing more than some dude that I grew up with that I really, really thought was the coolest drummer ever.
All right.
Went through a phase where he didn't want to play a ride cymbal, so I'm like, well, I don't either.
There were a lot of hep cats around here several years ago that went through the I'm not going to play a hi-hat phase.
Yeah, well.
Is that a bunch of crap?
Define hep.
Hep means that you're aware that you're hep. And I think they were.
To answer your previous question, that's a bunch of crap. No, I mean, you know, whatever, man. that's kind of weird to refuse to play a hi-hat. I'm sort of like, that'd probably be the first cymbals I would have set up if I were told you can have one cymbal or cymbal-esque device on stage.
Max Roach would agree with you.
Well, yeah, because, geniuses tend to agree.
Hey, man.
I mean, trend-setting, music-changing people like Max and I, we...
And you wonder why in the past I asked you to join me on this show.
Yeah.
Makes sense now, doesn't it?
I'm just realizing you're just using me for my stature and brilliance.
Hey, you've already signed the contract.
Dang
man.
it.
You're obligated.
Max, God rest your soul.
Yeah.
The struggle is real.
John, you have anything else, or you want me to finish up with something?
I think we're ready to move on.
The one other quick magic bullet that I'll give you, that I do, that I don't know anybody else that does this. Maybe it's because it's not a great idea, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. Something that I do in my cymbal bag is I actually put spare drum heads down in there. It works.
It's a good idea.
At least it works for me. You know what I mean? You might think that, the integrity of the drum head, in between cymbals, it's probably not a good thing. Let me tell you, I've never had a hoop on a drum head get bent. I've never had a drum head either get dented or, broken or split. And I've been doing it for years, and it works. And the majority of the time, if I'm doing local stuff, it's primarily just 14s that I'll put in there for my snare drum.
Get through a gig if you have.
Yeah.
I'll tell you the truth, man. I'm so lazy about changing heads that I just bring a second kit. Just in case. If a head breaks, I'll just, put up another tom.
Dude, that makes my carrying a flight case story
I'm
look
kidding.
like amateur stuff, dude. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't, I've never broken, I can't remember breaking a head. I think I blew out a bottom snare head once, but it was
That's
probably
a real man
like
thing, yeah.
over tightened or already split because I'm not a man when it comes to that. But I carry the extra snare drum.
Yeah.
Always. So that's kind of my solution, I guess. But I don't ever think having heads around, or maybe you have a spot you could fit them under the seat in your vehicle.
Yeah.
Having some available is a really good idea.
John, I feel like I've pretty much said all I need. I've done enough damage today. Do you have anything you want to add to it?
No, man, that felt pretty good. I think there was some really good things that, again, like I said, sometimes we face some challenges in trying to find the right solution to something, angles, adjustments, all that. And we also, sometimes it's just nice to hear that your ideas are implemented by others. So we hopefully touched you in some way, shape, or form.
Well, there are so many times in our business that there is no instant cure or magic bullet to fix something, but there are a few, and we gave you some of them today. Little practical tips that you can use, because like I said, these are the kind of things that a lot of times, nobody tells you these. You just kind of dumb into them over a period of time, and so maybe you can use some of these things, or maybe like John said before, you do use some already, and it's somewhat of a validation that the guys on the podcast say it's cool.
A lot of stuff like this too, man. Just riffing with your friends about things, just talking with guys. Like I remember when I lived in St. Louis, I would go to that drum headquarters all the time and just hang out, and we'd just be talking about gear and players, and it's incredible what you can learn, from experienced pros, so just always, I'm always talking with other drummers about this and that, and every once in a while something really cool comes up. But man, there's a lot to be said for communicating with peers and all that too. You know? or if you're having a problem with something. I mean, now you can just get on Facebook and go, man, I can't get my cymbal angle right. You know, like, there's going to be 42 people with an opinion. So,
John, you just mentioned something about seasoned professionals.
I did.
Yeah. And to go ahead and finish up our show today, put a button on it, put this thing to bed, we're going to talk about some of our favorite underappreciated seasoned professionals. We haven't done one of those segments in about a month or so. So we got a couple of good ones today. Mm-hmm. John, tell us who you like. Who's a great underappreciated drummer?
I'm going to put the fabulous Andy Newmark out there for consideration. I'm never as prepared as Phil with detail, but some highlights of Mr. Newmark's career would be Sly and the Family Stone, Fresh. Mm-hmm. Legendary and groundbreaking record. Played with John Lennon, pardon me. The Roxy Music stuff, it's just stellar. Many, many, many music fans and musicians embrace that as high quality pop music. He toured with Clapton quite a bit. Just a really great groove player, simple setup. You know, just a lot of things that resonate with me. But as a player, he's got a lot to offer in the, you know, in respect to serving songs and great feel and sound, and a cool guy. He's got some incredible stories, needless to say. But I encourage you to check Andy Newmark out. What a beast.
The first time that I actually put the name with the face on Andy Newmark was actually I had seen him before, and of course I'd heard his music before, but I didn't realize who it was until I read an interview with him in Modern Drummer back in, God, it was probably, I was just a kid, man. It was in the early 80s or mid 80s or something like that. Yeah, and this is a guy also that if you're not familiar with the name, you will have the exact same kind of revelation that I had, that, oh my God, he was on all that stuff.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely.
I always remember in that period, it was that natural finished Yamaha Tour Series kit or 8000 Series kit, and cymbals were real high.
Yeah.
And his hair was huge. I remember that period. That's probably from that Modern Drummer stuff.
Had to be.
Yeah.
I heard he was a great proponent of gearless tilters.
Oh, of course he was, man.
Cymbal springs, too.
Yet another legend in line with me, right?
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
You know, John, my guy I'm going to go with, had his heyday in the 80s. As well, not as well as Andy Newmark. Andy Newmark was prior to that, but that's when I really discovered him, was in the 80s. This guy also discovered in the 80s. And let me go ahead and say this. This is going to fly in the face of convention of my previous picks, because I was made well aware by a listener that even though you have mentioned that I have reinvented myself over the past 15 years as not being just the jazz drummer, that all of my picks on everything I've ever done on this show has been jazz drummers, except for Kenny Jones. So,
but
yeah.
Before I forget, you're kind of exposing yourself, and this will reinforce my thing, but, you know, like giving a shout out to a drummer from a metal band recently. And,
yeah.
You know, you were kind of going on about a couple other hard rockers, so maybe in your youth
it's the roots, man. Yeah.
You were a bit more inclined to like a little rock and roll, man. I'm excited about that.
This guy that I'm going to talk to you about today, he is a sorely overlooked hard rock drummer. He's a New York guy, played with some New York bands, Played with some British bands also. We're going to talk about the specific groups in a second. And John, aside from being a truly wonderful player who gets a great sound out of his instrument, he's quite the showman also.
That he is.
He's quite the showman. And the drummer that I am speaking of is the wonderful Bobby Rondinelli. I first became aware of Bobby when he played with Rainbow back in the early 80s, like around 1980, 81, 82. There is a record in particular that he played on that he is a rock god, and it's Rainbow's Straight Between the Eyes. I mean, he is just everything you'd want to be in a rock drummer on that. Great, huge drum sounds, and granted, some of that has to do with the recording process, but it certainly helps to have a guy that can flat out hit them back there. And
they weren't replacing with samples at any point.
You got that right, man. Yeah, so he played on a few Rainbow records. A little bit later in his career, he played some with the New York rock icons, Long Island icons, Blue Oyster Cult. Mm-hmm. And he also played some with Black Sabbath during one of their many feuds with Bill Ward, So, yeah, he played with Black Sabbath for a while as well. And then aside from quite a historical rock and roll playing career, he also has written one of the foremost books on double bass drumming as well. It's a very highly regarded, well-written book that he put out, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 years ago or so. So he's got a little bit of a pedagogue in him as well,
Nice.
With that. So that's my pick for the day is the great Bobby Rondinelli.
What's interesting about Bobby is, and I kind of feel like there's plenty more we could kind of touch on, but he was a really, really kind of a precursor to what we ended up seeing as the LA hair band scene. Mm-hmm. And I feel like there's some guys that were really overlooked, a lot of East Coast guys especially, because the hair band thing, were predominantly West Coast bands.
Right.
There were some, there was a band here or there that, broke out of New York, but there's a few East Coast dudes who were kind of overlooked, and I kind of feel like they were just a little bit ahead of that curve with the MTV thing and the exposure and all that. And a lot, and two or three of them I'm thinking of were like just much better players than a lot of the guys that came out of that LA scene. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that in the LA scene there were two or three guys that were really, really great players. And then a bunch that were just okay and had a look and a vibe and a big kit. Yeah. But there's definitely some of these, Aldridge is another one that kind of fits in that, just kind of, even though he got some play, but really great players,
wonderful
hard rock players, together on a lot of levels, technique and all that. And, unsung maybe just because of what I talked about. Like they didn't get quite the exposure that some other guys did.
Another guy that's kind of cut from that same cloth that's another New York guy is Joe Franco. Used to play with the band The Good Rats. Yeah. That band just never really did anything outside that region, really.
Didn't he have some presence with Modern Drummer, like teaching-wise or article-wise for a while?
Well, to me, Joe Franco wrote the Bible on double bass drumming.
That's what
That's the book on that. That's the one that I if I teach out of it, if I teach that method, it's out of that book. Yeah. It's very well done.
From that same pedigree, and you could talk about a couple of those guys that came into the KISS camp.
Oh, yeah.
That were East Coast guys that were pretty serious players, too, and kind of, even though they got some props being in KISS, it's still like we don't ramble on about Eric Carr or, and there's the East Coast had some pretty good output.
Yeah.
As far as that goes. Bobby was exceptional.
Yeah, he absolutely is. And you know, another guy, man, that was with a little bit of a, we'll call it a little bit of a gimmick band and whatnot, but the drummer from Twisted Sister, who actually I think Bobby did sit in with Twisted Sister some, but there was a guy named AJ Pero that played with Twisted Sister. AJ Pero could flat out play.
Well, you know, a lot of these guys, like I saw the documentary on Twisted Sister, and one difference I think in the 80s scene is the LA bands, you know, they'd work their shows and they'd play here and there and make a, you know, like LA pay to play kind of thing and all that. Whereas man, you watch that Twisted Sister documentary, those guys worked their butts off. I mean, they were playing 6 nights a week. And, you know, how can you not get it together, you know? I mean, the East Coast bands, there was that tri-state scene where, you know, especially the better ones, they had some decent sized rooms and they were playing all the time. So, of course, you're going to have some players coming out of there. Yeah. That, you know, and I think it's a little different in the LA scene that guys weren't playing as much. Some rose to the, you know, top. Tommy Lee, he's a monster no matter where he was. But, you know, some of those guys were just average drummers. There's
didn't mean for this thing to morph into a Twisted Sister love fest, but I'll tell you this: there's a mutual friend of ours, a keyboard player that grew up in the New York area that used to play in different bands up there, especially during that early 80s, mid 80s time, that used to do some clubs that were divided in a couple of different separate rooms, and there was like a hard rock room and like a pop room and that kind of stuff. And he said that he used to share green rooms with Twisted Sister and said they were like the nicest guys you would ever want to meet.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that. I always love hearing that about anybody, especially, you know, their persona might lead you to believe otherwise. Yeah. But, you know, that documentary, it's pretty intelligent individuals involved in that band, and they had a rough road business-wise and all that, but nonetheless, man, giving some East Coast rock drummers some love.
Bobby Rondinelli, man.
I like it.
Check him out. You know, side note, on our little intro theme, our little 1 minute theme getting us into it, there actually is about 10, 15 seconds of Rondinelli. Yes. Doing that.
Yeah, you're wearing your heart on your sleeve, man.
Love the Bobby Rondinelli.
That's awesome.
Hey, Bobby, follow us, man, on Twitter or something.
Come on.
You know? Yeah. All right. Well, John, I think we pretty much covered the bases today.
Well, cool. Thanks for bearing with my bizarre frame of mind and poor attempts at humor today.
I'm used to it.
Yeah. My wife isn't, though. Can you talk to her?
Sure.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, all right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. As usual, you can get a new podcast every Monday. We're available on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and, of course, your favorite podcast app. Please stay in touch with us. As you've just heard, we already have listened or have already answered a bunch of emails and questions and whatnot that you guys send us. We appreciate it. We also appreciate all the different comments about the direction of the show and what you like, what you don't like. We take it all to heart. And be looking for some new stuff coming up. And one last thing. And we'll hold our feet to the fire on this, John. You know, I mentioned a few podcasts ago that we're getting ready to have an interview. Well, it hadn't happened yet, but it is absolutely 100% going to happen. It's just that, you know, extenuating circumstances has new information has come to light, man.
Life.
Yeah. But yeah, stay tuned. That's a coming really soon.
Excited
and then there
about
will
that.
Yeah, and listeners, you should be excited about it too, because it's the first few we're going to do. I'm not aware that any of these folks they either have never done an interview or it's been a while since they've done an interview.
Yeah.
So
Definitely
you know,
in the...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's going to be good stuff. All right, guys, that's it for this week. Again, stay in touch with us. You can catch us on our Facebook page, Twitter at DW Groovecast, or email us DrummersWeeklyGroovecast@gmail.com. Until next Monday, we will see you then.
Heartfelt thanks. Peace.
Shoot me.